For those of you who are seeing me for the first time, my name is Tina and I'll be today's facilitator. And before we begin, June is National Indigenous History Month in Canada. So across Canada, it's a month where we honor, learn, and acknowledge the contributions First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples have made in shaping Canada. Acknowledging those who lived before colonization and still live here today is an important work, both individually and collectively. And I am speaking to you from Toronto. It is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And it is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and we are respectful and grateful to be able to live and work on this land. And I recognize that land acknowledgements are a small step, but an important one towards reconciliation, and allows us who are settlers the opportunity to reflect and stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples. So today is our 60th anniversary. What does that mean? It's 60 years of volunteers working alongside local partners, many of whom are on the call today. Thank you for your service. It is 60 years of employing a people-centered approach to development and 60 years of overcoming the challenges of reducing poverty and inequality. And with us today to help mark this milestone, we have our CEO, Glenn Mifflin, the Honorable Lloyd Agsworthy. We will have a keynote address given by Shirley Tillman and a toast given by Patricia Perez-Coots, Cuso's board chair. And we hope that we'll be able to leave time at the end for some Q&A questions directly directed to our speakers. So with that, just a little bit of housekeeping. I know many of you are joining. I just got a note from somebody in Italy. So you're joining us from across the world. I don't know if you're joining us by telephone, but if you are using a computer, you'll have the opportunity to use the Q&A box to ask your questions to the speakers. There's a chat and other things that you can do amongst yourselves, but if you want us to consider your question for the speakers at the end, I suggest that you use the Q&A box. We will also invite you to participate in our polls, and what better way than launching into a poll right away. So the question on your screen should be, what region of the world did you volunteer in? And you have multiple choices because I know many of you have volunteered several times. So let's leave this up for a few seconds and then I'll share the results. Wow, look at Africa go. So I'll end the poll and I'll share the results. And as you can see, so welcome everybody, but especially those who are in the continent. Thank you for being with us today. And that's what a poll looks like. So I'll stop here, and I would like to now present a video of the Honorable Karina Gould, a message from the Government of Canada.
It is really wonderful to be able to celebrate Cuso's 60th anniversary. As I have shared in the past, my personal journey into international development started off as a volunteer when I was 18 and I decided that I wanted to see the world, and I ended up volunteering in an orphanage in Puebla, Mexico. I always cared about social justice and women's rights, but it hit home while I was in Mexico. And that experience ignited a fire in me to continue this work and to continue fighting for gender equality. I am so glad that I made that decision to volunteer abroad, because it set me on a journey that has landed me in this position as Minister of International Development, where I get to support the incredible work of organizations like Cuso International. Congratulations on 60 years of tremendous impact.
So I would like to thank the Honorable Karina Gould for that wonderful message, and to the Government of Canada through Global Affairs Canada for their ongoing support to Cuso International. And with that, I would like to formally introduce our CEO. Glenn Mifflin joined the Cuso International Board of Directors in 2015. He was elected its treasurer in 2016 and was appointed Chief Executive Officer in 2017. Previously, Glenn enjoyed a successful 25-year career in the energy industry as a board member and senior executive for a $4 billion midstream energy company. Glenn has held senior leadership roles in public practice with Clarkson Gordon Chartered Accountants, now Ernst & Young, and Coopers Lybrand Chartered Accountants, now PwC. A fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Newfoundland and Labrador, and a notary public. Glenn holds an MBA from Queen's University, an Institute of Corporate Directors designation from the Rotman School of Business, University of Toronto, and is a board leadership fellow of the U.S. National Association of Corporate Directors. He has served on multiple industry and professional boards and remains active with many community and professional associations. And so I'll just pause here because I do have more slides to share with you. But what I think I will do, as all of our speakers are friends, I will take myself off camera, stop the presentation at this time, and then continue. So let me stop the presentation. And take myself off camera. Lots of clicks here. And so with that, Glenn, Lloyd, and Shirley, you should be able to, and Patricia, you should be able to see yourself. Is that correct? Just give me a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. So I think that's what the audience is seeing now as well, is just the four of you on screen. And what I will do now is turn things over to Glenn to do his warm remarks to all his good friends. Over to you, Glenn.
Thank you, Tina. It's really so great to have so many of you with us today. And to get things started, I'd really like to introduce someone I'm proud to call a friend, the Honorable Lloyd Axworthy. Lloyd is the chair of the World Refugee and Migration Council and one of Canada's leading voices on global migration and refugee protection. After a 27-year political career where he served as Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Employment and Immigration, Lloyd has continued to work extensively on human security, refugee protection, and human rights in Canada and abroad. In May 2017, Lloyd was presented with the Pearson Peace Medal by the Governor-General of Canada. And in his term as President and Vice Chancellor of the University of Winnipeg, he initiated innovative programs for migrant and Aboriginal youth communities and continues to devote his energies towards refugee reform. There's a lot more I can say about Lloyd, but suffice it to say that Cuso International was lucky to have Lloyd as chair of our board from 2014 to 2018. His commitment to defending the rights of marginalized individuals was an outstanding service to this organization. So Lloyd, over to you.
Well, thank you, Glenn, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this celebration. It really is a really juncture moment, I think, for many of us who have been acquainted and knowledgeable about the work of Cuso. And might I just say, I want to pay a moment of tribute to you, Glenn. You're leaving the CEO office this summer, and all the work that you did to help bring Cuso out of some difficulties, provide stability and some direction and leadership was really something I think we all honor and want to compliment and look forward to continuing our association as we both move on into things. And speaking of leadership, my task today, tonight, is to introduce Dr. Shirley Tillman, who has in so many ways exhibited those qualities of leadership. I've always been intrigued, Shirley, about your early career in the whole molecular biology field. You were really part of a vanguard of scientists who began to make the life sciences something that is real. And I think today, as we're looking at vaccines and other issues, the product of the kind of work that you and your colleagues did in those years. And that took a lot of leadership because there was a lot of barriers to overcome. And secondly, I think when I got to know you a little bit more, when you were president of Princeton University, by the way, I'll say as I digress, I'm a graduate of that university and was thrilled to see Shirley, both as I think the second woman president, but also the second or third Canadian who took on that office. And your direction at that university in terms of opening up doors, providing for access, changing the financial models. I remember a discussion we had about it. You gave me some good ideas that I could use when I sort of took on the same kind of a job at the University of Winnipeg. And of course, since then, the work that you've been doing in terms of establishing a much stronger sense of philanthropic efforts to meet those kinds of concerns. But probably the most crucial question is, how did you become a leader? And I'm going to make some suggestions if I might. It probably starts with just a good DNA. And I would say I would attribute part of it to your education at Calvin High School here in Winnipeg, which is only about 5 blocks from where I live. Probably Queen's University helped a little bit. And certainly the efforts in terms of a scientific discipline. But I would make this case that one of the most important elements in helping to define your ability to lead was serving as a Cuso volunteer in Sierra Leone. I think it was 1968, if I'm right. And it is only illustrative of what I found when I was on the Cuso board, that every time I would see a Cuso volunteer or have a chance to talk to them, and certainly the alumni, what came through loud and clear was a sense of public service. That being a volunteer was not just a 2-year experience or 17 or 18 months. When people came back to Canada or went to other locations, they were imbued with a sense of service on human issues, development issues, and always showed that kind of empathy. And I think that has been a hallmark of your career and your very different kinds of forms and expressions. And so I would say that there couldn't be a better choice as a keynote than Dr. Shirley Tillman, because she really represents, I think, the kind of sense of direction and purpose that Cuso volunteers either bring to it. When they bring to it, they certainly come out with it. And they represent a very large network of people around the world who are still doing great and good work. And so Shirley, my thanks to you for the work you've done, for the times we spent together, for the contributions that you made, and particularly for giving Cuso once again the banner and the branding of someone who, with your leadership abilities and achievements, can trace back to those precious few years as a teacher at Sierra Leone. So I'm very pleased to ask you to provide the keynote address, and look forward to listening to your words.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. I will ask you to take yourself off camera, as we would like to have Shirley's address, have her on screen. Thank you very much.
Lloyd, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I can tell you my mother would have loved it. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, fellow Cuso volunteers. It's a pleasure to be joining all of you on the occasion of the 60th anniversary of Cuso's founding. I'm particularly grateful to Glenn Mifflin for the honor of being asked to speak. So he asked if I could talk about the impact that Cuso has had on my life. But to give full credit to Cuso, I need to paint a very brief picture of my life before 1968. I grew up in a middle-class family, moving every few years between Ontario, Alberta, and Manitoba, and leading what can only be described as a sheltered life. Sheltered from the world outside Canada, or for that matter, sheltered from much that was happening outside my neighborhood. But there were 4 things that changed all that. An extraordinary history teacher in high school who began my awakening. A family trip to New Orleans and Houston that opened my eyes to the horror of racial discrimination in the Jim Crow South. At Queens, it was the confluence of the civil rights movement, the women's liberation movement, and the Vietnam War. And last but hardly least, as Lloyd just said, Cuso. By the time I was about to graduate with a degree in chemistry and mathematics, I was primed with a desire to save the world. My first idea was to go to the far north and teach in a First Nation school. But I was quickly disabused of that notion by a government official who scolded me that my first class honors degree from Queens did not qualify me to teach anything. The Cuso came to the rescue. At that time, the vast majority of volunteers, at least in the program that I joined in West Africa, were freshly minted college graduates, just like me, completely wet behind the ears. But to quote President Barack Obama, we were fired up and ready to go. But when my mother learned that my assignment in Sierra Leone would bring me to a country that was ranked by the World Health Organization as dead last on a list of quality national health care systems, she stopped speaking to me and sending me weekly care packages. This was not a popular decision in the Caldwell household. But I needn't tell any of you on this celebration that arriving in Sierra Leone was a culture shock of the first order. But in the 2 years I spent teaching in Moyamba, an upcountry county seat, I learned so much about myself and what I valued, about a people whose life experiences were so different from mine, who welcomed me into their community with such generosity and warmth, along with a great deal of laughter, about a colonial history that made me ashamed of my British Commonwealth heritage. What I cannot say, however, is that I was able to give back to Sierra Leone, and especially to my students, even a small fraction of what I gained. The debt has been entirely mine to bear. A lasting gift that I received during my 2 years in Sierra Leone was experiencing what it felt like to be a minority in a society. I do not for one moment mean to suggest that it was in any way comparable to the relentlessness of the 1,000 cuts that underrepresented minorities in Canada and the United States experience on a daily basis. Rather, I was greeted as a curiosity by most Sierra Leoneans, with a mixture of bemusement and puzzlement. The feeling that I speak of was one of always feeling just a little off kilter, taken aback by the reactions of Sierra Leoneans to events, failing to make sense of what I was observing, knowing that I was well outside my comfort zone. To give you an especially powerful example that has stayed with me all these years, in my first year, a young boy in Moyamba was hit and killed by a lorry. When I went to offer my condolences to his parents, I was met not with uncontrolled grief, but deep resignation. It's God's will, they told me. At first, I was dumbfounded. How could a father accept such a calamity? But with time, I came to understand that childhood mortality was a constant fact of life in Sierra Leone, and his resignation was a necessary coping mechanism that allowed him to face tragedy and yet go on. The child's death came not as a complete surprise to his parents, but a heartbreak that needed to be borne. What did I take away from such encounters? That my own worldview, my own set of values and ingrained attitudes that guided my way in the world were contingent, not universal. From my Cuso experience, I learned humility in the face of difference. Many years later at Princeton, I encountered a far more sophisticated version of this lesson in the writings of my colleague, Kwame Anthony Appiah, the distinguished Ghana-born moral philosopher, who has written so eloquently on the importance of cosmopolitanism. He defines this as the ability to engage in conversation across national, religious, and other forms of identity, exchanges in which the universal must always be balanced against the particular. His goal for such conversation is not to reach consensus, but to gain understanding, and if possible, to imagine for even a moment what it must be like to live in someone else's skin. In conversation with Anthony, I realized how important it was to have a student body drawn from all over the world, and to send students out into the world to become cosmopolitans themselves. Consequently, Princeton began to extend its immensely generous financial aid to international students, which radically changed the demographics of the international student body. From what I used to joke was largely composed of the sons of Saudi princes, to include a brilliant mathematician from a tiny Bosnian village, a Maori villager from New Zealand, and a Somali brought up in a refugee camp. Today, international students comprise the largest number of consumers per capita of Princeton's financial aid, and we are producing, as a consequence, far more cosmopolitans. From my Cuso experience, I developed a deep conviction in the value of timeouts in life, the importance of taking pauses. The current generation that I teach at Princeton can at times experience life as a modern version of the Bataan Death March, trudging laser-focused in search of the brass ring of career success, afraid to make a mistake or stray from the beaten path. I've urged many of them to take a break after their undergraduate degree before rushing right on to postgraduate education, to follow Monty Python's advice and do something completely different, to take up the metaphorical equivalent of a sherbet course in the middle of a long dinner, a break to cleanse the palate before embarking on whatever comes next. In 2009, I took this idea a step further and created a Princeton-funded gap year program that I called the Bridge Year Program, because after all, gaps are things you fall into, whereas bridges are something you cross over. This program sends incoming freshmen to countries around the world for a year of what we call humble service. You will all recognize this program as Cuso by another name. What is most gratifying to me is that those Bridge Year participants return to Princeton for their freshman year, 1 year older, but many years wiser, as true cosmopolitans. They're evangelical in their enthusiasm for the importance and value of encountering the other. They go on to become the leaders of the student body, powerful advocates for social justice, and proselytizers for global engagement. As Lloyd said just a few minutes ago, they are not so different from the Cuso graduates on this celebration. One last gift that Cuso gave to me was the opportunity to discover my love of teaching, a passion that has lasted to this day, in fact, to the semester that just ended. From that terrifying first day standing in front of a room full of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed boys at the Moyamba Boys Secondary School, most of whom represented the one hope and investment of their village, who were investing in the possibility of a brighter future. I was hooked. When I left Sierra Leone, I was not entirely sure what the future would hold, but I knew that I wanted to spend my life in conversation with young people. Now, in preparing these remarks, I'm aware that Cuso has changed a great deal since my time as a volunteer, and entirely for the better. For one thing, Canada herself is now a destination that was denied to me in 1968, with volunteers now working in the Northwest Territories. Second, the average Cuso volunteer, and not to suggest that any of you are anything but above average on this call, is far more prepared to have an impact than the green volunteers who were sent into the field in my time. We had gusto, but not much else in terms of practical knowledge that host country nationals were seeking in their partnerships with Cuso. Today, Cuso volunteers are prepared with the kinds of real world skills that are needed so much in the developing world. But thinking ahead, let me conclude on a sober note, despite this celebratory occasion. I've just finished reading Paul Farmer's new book on the Ebola outbreak in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone in 2014 and 2015, entitled Fevers, Feuds, and Diamonds, Ebola and the Ravages of History. Farmer is an extraordinary man. In fact, he's one of my personal heroes and a co-founder of Partners in Health, a US-based NGO that responded to the health crisis in West Africa in 2014. The Sierra Leone he describes is all too recognizable to me, despite the 50 years that separate his encounter and mine. He describes a healthcare system that was close to non-existent and completely unprepared to respond to the virus. He calls Sierra Leone a medical desert. The infrastructure on every level that has yet to recover from the ravages of the 1999 Civil War. This is a country that badly needs the likes of Cuso and its volunteer army of skilled Canadians who are eager to share their know-how, to empower women and girls, and to improve the prospects for the next generation. I hope that one day the Cuso will be able to return there to contribute to its future prosperity. If we have learned nothing else from this COVID-19 soaked annus horribilis, we have learned that globalization has made one country's emergency everyone's emergency. The Delta SARS-CoV-2 variant that first appeared in India but is rapidly spreading around the world, upending the progress many countries had made in defeating the virus, is a perfect metaphor for our interrelatedness. Cuso, with its mission to create a global future free from poverty and inequality, is an organization that matters, and I'm immensely proud to have been associated with it, and one to which I will always be grateful for opening my eyes to the world. Happy 60th birthday, Cuso.
Wow. I don't have the right words, so I won't be the next speaker, but I really at this point invite Lloyd and Patricia and Glenn to please join me in turning on your camera and unmuting yourselves.
Here we are.
Can you turn me on? Because it's just that you have disabled my video.
Hey, Shirley, that was a magnificent address. Thank you so
So
much.
there's right at the bottom of your screen, Patricia, on the left-hand side. There you go.
I got it. I got it. Thank you.
So thank you for that. And what stuck out for me, and I won't belabor, but it was the Bridges year and the humble service is what touched me, as bridges are, intentional and meant to versus a gap year. But I will stop there and turn things over to Patricia. Patricia, for your remarks to Shirley and a toast to Cuso International. Over to you.
Thank you, Tina. Shirley, you are such an inspiration. I have no words, enough words to show and demonstrate my admiration for all the work that you've done, and certainly to thank you for sharing your personal reflections with us today. You have remained a champion, an ambassador, and a true agent of change. And what is more important is that you are helping this world to be more equitable and just. I really, really value your words and your wisdom. And thank you. And now it's my honor and my duty to raise a glass, and I came prepared with Canada Dry. It's too early, but anyway, I would like to raise a glass and really toast everyone here. I see in the counter there is almost 200 folks that have joined us. I'm so proud of that. And I would like to toast everyone participating with us today. And it is because of you. It is because of giving us your precious time, your knowledge, wisdom, and your donations that we are able to continue collectively to work towards what we do here and certainly cause positive impact in millions of lives. So thank you all for your outstanding service, your volunteer, and your kindness. And most of all right now, happy anniversary, Cuso. Cheers to all of you. Cheers.
Yes.
And with that, I would love to go back to our screen and share a wonderful video that was produced for our 60th. And so with that, we have come to a fun part of the town hall, which is an opportunity for you to get your questions answered. So I think you've heard Glenn and Lloyd and Shirley and Patricia. You know they're all astute international development and international relations pioneers. And so maybe you have questions related to Cuso or questions just related in general to the world stage that they've been on. And I invite those questions as well. So just before we go to the live board, I would like to thank Nan Webe. Thank you, Nan, for sending in a question in advance. Nan asks, what is your fondest memory or proudest accomplishment during your time at Cuso? And so not to put Patricia on the spot, but maybe you can start us off with fondest memories, proudest accomplishments, and then we'll go to Lloyd and maybe kind of just hear a little bit more about Cuso and how it touches you personally. Go ahead, Patricia.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. I have lots of fondest memories already. And frankly, one of the most impactful moments of my life was when I met these very strong young women in Lima, Peru, who were associated with a movement, a feminist movement called Manuela Ramos. and their stories and their work with very few resources really in terms of their fight in favor of women's rights and against violence, gender violence was very strong. There's very few instances in which, I lost my cool, but I frankly, at that time, it brought me down to tears, and to be able to share with that. There's many other ones, but they remain friends, and I remain in contact with them. And this is very important because Peru and many countries in Latin America have suffered horribly with the pandemic, and the rate of violence against women has continued and increased. That's one of the fondest memories that I have, though it's not a happiest memory because it has continued, but we only can do so much more in terms of working in favor of them. And I will leave it there, I think, in terms of the experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia, and Peru and all the women's work that's women's rights works and advocacy that's going on there. Lloyd, did you have any fondest memories or happy accomplishments that you would like to?
I actually do. When I was first appointed or elected as chair of the board, the weekend after, I was shopping at a Sobeys just on Taylor Avenue in Winnipeg, kind of minding my own business, looking where I could find out the paper goods. And a gentleman came over to me and whispered in my ear, 81. And I thought I had won a lottery, or that I thought it was some secret code. And I was puzzling about this when I went to the checkout counter. And then a young one came and said to me, 94. And I thought I was probably part of some kind of reality show where numbers were being thrown just to totally perplex, until I realized that these were Cuso volunteers who had that secret kind of password. Give me the year, and it was immediately sort of recognized. But it takes me to two quick comments. First, I want to really say just how wonderful I thought Shirley's address was. She just captured the very essence of what being a volunteer is, because it's a matter of giving, but also what you receive. And I've always believed in the Times in Foreign Affairs and Government that one of the real objectives is to give Canadians the opportunity to serve, not just to watch or reflect, but to actually serve. And so, volunteer like Cuso, going on election missions, there's a whole range of things. Canadians are deeply committed to helping resolve some of these large existential issues. And I think the more we can give that opportunity, the more it really helps us develop as Shirley said, a cosmopolitan citizenry that understands the interdependence that we have. And just one final note, Tina, if I might. I guess the one thing I was kind of proud of when during my tenure on the board was that we actually inaugurated the first Cuso volunteer activity in Canada, in the Northwest Territories. And I'm so glad that Shirley mentioned that, because many of the issues of building capacity, providing gender rights, reaching out and showing that there is a communion of spirits is as important in parts of our country. In fact, many parts of our country as it is around the world. And I think, as again, to go back to Shirley's comment, the COVID epidemic has just opened up a refractory light and a prism on just how much we have to work together, to collaborate, integrate, and forget all the kinds of things that divide and all the things that unite. So my experience at Cuso was just a way of seeing that in action, on the ground, in concrete terms. Nothing could be better. And congratulations to all the volunteers.
Thank you. Glenn, did you have one or two accomplishments, memories that you'd like to share?
Sure, it helps to speak into the mouthpiece, I guess. I guess two revelations. First, the true impact that our programming have had to make a difference, for us to share our skills and to really change people's futures. Our current program in Colombia, creating livelihoods, with a preponderance of women and girls who are doing well. Migrants, the VENS migrants, the program for that group, and the Cameroonian refugees coming into Nigeria, the girls' education program we have in Ethiopia. So that we've made the midwives program that we had in 4 African countries. We've made a real, I can see the changes in that we've made to people's lives. But the second thing is that the volunteerism is a real revelation. Certainly, we had a Canadian volunteer in Colombia working just after the conflict in Colombia to build livelihoods. And this particular lady went down and I remember we visited a subsistence farmer who she visited, and this farmer lived on the the steep end of a mountain, and with a subsistence farmer, very small crop, and he grew not the big cash crops, but he grew bananas and coffee. And he said to our volunteer, he said, "How do I increase my crop yield?" And she walked up and down his plantation with him, and she said, "Well, you've got to cut down some plants. You really only need a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter. And all the brothers and sisters, the aunties and uncles, cut them all down." And he said, "That doesn't make any sense at all. I want to grow more." And his average yield on a bunch of bananas was very, very poor. It was between 12 and 15 pounds. And afterwards, a year later, he couldn't carry the bunch. His yield quadrupled. And the other suggestion she made is, and by the way, grow your coffee crops underneath these, your banana trees. It makes it a little crowded, but that's the way it is. And your coffee won't get sunburned. And when I was talking to him, he had increased his family's income from, there was 4 brothers, and they made pre-Canadian volunteer about $1,500 a year between the 4 of them, Canadian. And afterwards, they had quadrupled the family income to about $8,000 Canadian a year, and they were going to buy a generator so that they could watch football on their black and white TV. But it changed their lives.
Absolutely.
And similar, I'll just carry on. Brevity is not my strong suit. We had some Canadians that we brought to Asosa in Ethiopia. And again, we hear about hospitals and all this sort of thing, but this particular hospital had no running water, spotty electricity, and the patient's family was responsible to take you out of the operating room, and the patient's family would go down to the river and get water and wash your sheets and put them on the tree and the fence to dry. And the revelation of that for Canadian volunteers, so used to the privileges we have in Canada, really is an eye-opener for us. So those are sort of some thoughts that I've seen.
Thank you, Glenn. And there's just a question here from Paul Wilson in respects to our diaspora program. So I can answer that since I take care of that particular portfolio with the organization. So it is ongoing, Paul. It's not to the extent that it was, but always happy to engage with diaspora organizations. If you know of any, please do reach out to me. And yes, it's part of our cooperation, international development cooperation program. So thanks for that question. And maybe now, kind of as you're still on the board and are leading our chair, Patricia, maybe there's a question from Brenda about what's now, like what now as it relates to kind of directions or initiatives, year 61 per se. Maybe you can answer that one.
Absolutely. We're in constant evolution, and it is true what is being said in regards to the pandemic showing us more. I mean, the good news is that Cuso demonstrated its strong ability to adapt and turn what it could have been a very difficult situation with volunteering, with sending volunteers, to something very positive with regards to recruiting South volunteers, or making e-volunteer part of the way we now are sending volunteers, or sharing our expertise and knowledge. So that particular foundation of evolution has taken management and the board into a new and more enhanced, I guess, view of Cuso in the next 5 to 8 years. And one that I will hope you'll see in terms of growth of the institution, in terms of its reach, with the programs that we can manage, as well as the positive impact that we may cause in people's lives all around the developing world. And also to also diversify as well strongly who are the ones that are giving us their donations and whatnot. We're actually working very hard. For once now we're seeing a board very engaged. It was before always engaged, now it's a different engagement, and we're working very hard hand in hand with our lead people that are managing the various aspects of the entity. So it's all good news. It's very positive. There's a great deal of enthusiasm in the organization. We're coming out of COVID, hopefully sooner rather than later. And I look forward to reporting to you even more positive change in the next few years. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm just looking at the live Q&A board, and there's many questions in relation to programming. And I just wanted to make a note that because I don't have any of our HOPS heads of programs on with us for this Q&A session, we will be responding to programmatic questions more specifically, and we'll do that via email. So I just didn't want you to feel like you weren't being included. It's just within that area of expertise. We will get back to you via email. So thanks for that patience, and thanks for those programming questions. There's one from Elizabeth, and it's around Ms. Shirley's keynote address. She states that I can relate to Shirley's comment about how she approached Sierra Leone. So when she was volunteering there, when I was in Tanzania in 1968, it was with real idealism. We embraced Julius Nyerer's aims. We wanted to change the planet. In many ways, we were very naive. And so Elizabeth is wondering, and I'm not sure, Shirley, you can relate this to some of the kind of bridge building programs that you did at Princeton, maybe less of Cuso, but the question is wondering if volunteers today are as idealistic or as naive as they were back then. So Shirley, would you like to maybe take that question in relation to the work that you've done at Princeton?
Well, there is no question in my mind that the Bridge Year students we send out are naive. They are 18 years old. There's obviously been a positive selection for the students who are adventurous and willing to get off the beaten path even before college. But I am curious about the answer, Cuso's current answer to Elizabeth's question. Do you, as I watched Cuso, and I don't mean this as a negative, but professionalize the volunteer army, did they go in with more of their eyes wide open than we did when we were just fresh out of college?
If I may, Shirley, one of the things that we do have is and pride ourselves on it, is our SQUID training, which is skills and knowledge for international development. And a big part of that is cultural adaptation. And as an additional element of that, if you're being posted to Calabar in Nigeria, for example, in Cross River State, we'll bring in an individual who is from Calabar in Cross River State, Nigeria, and who will help you understand what you're going to experience there, the good restaurants to eat at, the ones you have to, part of town you have to stay away from, and that cultural adaptation is very important. The other things we test in that is what's very important to Cuso is flexibility and adaptability. Where you can't always walk a straight line. You have to be flexible, you have to be adaptable. And those are the skills we try and emphasize in that SQUID training. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Thank you, Glenn. So a lot of the programs, as I mentioned, thank you for being in touch. There's a lot of comments and wishing us well. Kanti, I have to mention you because you're always a great supporter of Cuso. Thank you for your kind words in the message board and the question board, I should say. And so this kind of plays off. I can think this will be our last question. And it's my hope that we do, but the question's from Stuart Goodings, and it's what's next for Cuso, and will it still be around in another 60 years? So I will give that to Patricia as the final question, as she has the lens of a Cuso board member going forward. And thank you for the question, Stuart. Patricia?
Stuart, we will be the next 60 years for sure. Okay, question is answered. In all our sincerity. Oh my goodness. You have no idea the level of motivation that currently is undergoing with Cuso at the board level, at the management, especially because we're seeing, I think, a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel, and especially because we've just been through a very difficult time, all of us, I guess, with COVID and whatnot. Volunteering, sending programs, there are actually a myriad of optionalities, and we're trying to be judicious in terms of how we select and we are able to contribute. We're known because of volunteering as the expertise, and then we're recognizing that. And there's no question in my mind that that will continue in the next few years. We need to certainly learn how to grow more, better, more efficiently. There's always room for positive change, even within the organization. So I leave it at that. I think that you will see very important and impactful years ahead of us. And certainly, while we have a very long tenure from Glenn as a board member and as an interim CEO, we're looking forward to a change in leadership that will also continue that path and work hand in hand with us at the board and with the management. And certainly not least with the local offices, and that's important. So we're definitely going to see a Cuso more enhanced version, I would say 2.0 for the next 60 years, with the foundations being built up at this present time. And thank you very much for your question.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, everybody. So with that, I think we do have time for another poll. And these polls do help us curate kind of content for some of the activities that we have planned throughout the year. And I'll just pull up the second poll. And so you should be seeing the decade. So when were you a Cuso volunteer? And see what decade of a dance party that we'll have. It looks like a 60s, 70s dance party. I was hoping for an 80s, but that doesn't look like it's gonna happen. A 60s dance party. Okay, I will end the poll and share the results. And so looks like we're going to have to plan some 60 themes going forward. But thank you for indulging me, us, and participating in this poll. Appreciate it. And just looking at the time, it was an epic moment for us to celebrate together. For the questions we didn't get to live, I know there's a few in there. We will be working our way through them, so know that you will get a response for sure. I would like to thank our honored guest, Shirley Tillman. Again, that whole element of the bridge and humble service is something that will stay with me. Thank you. Mr. Lloyd Agsworthy, our CEO, Glenn Mifflin, Cuso's chair, Patricia Perez-Coots, in celebrating this tremendous work of our Cuso community. And in closing today, I just want to say that this was just a kickoff to a year full of activities. So to Naveen, who also had a question within the Cuso question board, on August 26th, we will be hosting an alumni virtual engagement. We usually have a summer social here in Toronto, but we're going to do an alumni larger scale virtual engagement social. And guess what? You'll have your cameras on and your microphones on for everybody to be able to catch up and connect with one another. So beyond this little chat feature, we'll have breakout rooms and hopefully have more of a meaningful engagement. So do stay tuned for that and other activities throughout the year. I also want to highlight an area of our website, a new section of our alumni website, where you'll find stories and old podcasts and pictures and all like that. And I really do appreciate all of the material and content that you've sent through. So thank you. You helped to build Cuso into what we are today and continue to build us into what we will be tomorrow. We thank our partners, our donors, our volunteers for sharing your skills to end poverty. And it's really by working together and alongside people that is the model, that humble service that was said. With that, I would like to say and invite you that if you would like to support and donate today, our website is there, cusointernational.org. It is a people approach that supports the delivery of impact. And together we are, as everyone has said today, creating brighter futures. So thank you. We have come to the end just a few minutes early. I was hoping that was the case and not a few minutes late, but it still means it was a good party if we end on time. You'll be receiving a short survey. We always appreciate your feedback. Thank you for taking the time. You'll also be receiving a recording. So if you know somebody who wasn't able to participate live, please share the recording with them. And with that, happy anniversary to all of you and our Cuso community, and in peace and in solidarity. Bye for now.
Thanks,
Bye.
Tina.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Lloyd.
Bye.
Thanks, Lloyd. Thanks, Shirley. Thanks, Patricia.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.